Nobody likes seeing games fail, and it's even worse when franchises put out disappointing installments so consistently that it feels like there might be no way back for them. And in such moments, we can't help but feel like rather than having to face even more disappointment with sequels, maybe it would be better for the franchises to pump the brakes, either permanently or at least until they can get their act together. In this feature, we'll be talking about such franchises, and we'll begin with the one that burned us most recently. Contra. When Contra was at its peak, it was one of the best franchises in the industry. Contra games brought with them a guarantee of riotous fun, grueling action, and non-stop carnage. And when the franchise died down with the advent of time, it came as a bitter disappointment to a lot of people. Recently, Konami revived the franchise. Well, perhaps revived is the wrong word though, because really all Contra Rogue Core has done is drive the series even further into its depressing grave. Opting for a third-person shooting style instead of the side-scrolling run-and-gun action the series is known for, Contra Rogue Core completely misses the mark in every way possible, and doesn't seem to understand what fans liked about the series in the first place. Its failure is made all the more baffling when you consider that an indie game called Blazing Chrome came out earlier this year and delivered everything that made people love Contra in spades, and yet Konami seemed to have completely lost their way. Perhaps it's best to let this legendary property die with some dignity. Crackdown. Crackdown is a franchise that has always hinted at greatness and yet never quite managed to achieve it. The first game was a fun, open-world romp, while the second was also an enjoyable enough experience even though it disappointed many with its numerous flaws and the fact that it didn't really take the franchise forward the way that it should have. Crackdown 3, though, is the most disappointing of the lot. After a protracted development cycle and multiple delays, the game came out to widespread criticism. It wasn't a terrible game by any means, but it was middling at best. Its open world felt thoroughly outdated, its missions and story were dull and boring, and all that talk about cloud-powered destruction in its multiplayer turned out to be not entirely accurate. Crackdown 3 disappointed on multiple levels, and after 3 installments that have been mediocre at worst and fun yet forgettable at best, one can't help but wonder why we should keep giving it chances. WWE 2K. Back when the WWE license rested with THQ, the franchise had something of an identity. Though it was far from perfect, it knew how to have fun with the WWE property, and some of the games it delivered were a lot of fun. Ever since 2K got their hands on the WWE license, though, we've been treated to nothing but mediocrity. Their attempts to turn it into a conventional sports simulator are misguided. It's a WWE game for crying out loud, and the fact that every installment seems to suffer from the same fundamental issues and is thoroughly lacking in production values makes it all that much more of a disappointment. WWE 2K needs a major overhaul, in the absence of which it runs the risk of fading into obscurity. Mario Tennis. Nintendo's iconic plumber has tried his hand at a lot of stuff. Kart racing, platforming, partying, puzzling, role-playing, and a heck of a lot else. But the one area where it feels like he's never quite been able to achieve the heights that he has in other areas is tennis. Sure, Mario Tennis games have occasionally been fun, but they've also been terrible quite often, and quite recently. Sure, Mario Tennis Aces was a step in the right direction for what it's worth, but it didn't really do much to convince non-believers that this is a franchise worth investing time and money in. State of Decay. State of Decay is a franchise that just never took off. It's always been billed as a low-budget, second-tier franchise for Microsoft, and as such, fans' expectations from it have never been too high. But even so, it doesn't seem like it's doing all that it could and should. The first State of Decay was admittedly a lot of fun, and even though it was a flawed experience, it held a lot of untapped potential. Rather than making good on that potential though, its sequel turned out to be something of a disappointment. Don't get me wrong, State of Decay 2 is also plenty of fun, at least when it's working as intended, but numerous flaws bog it down and hold it back from being anything more than inconsistent and occasionally enjoyable. Would we be glad to see a State of Decay 3 that finally realizes the potential of this franchise? Well, heck yeah, we would. But at this point, one can't help but wonder if many people even have the sort of emotional investment in the property to be rooting for that kind of thing. FIFA on Switch. EA's laughable support for the Nintendo Switch is headlined by its annual FIFA releases, and they're a perfect representation for it. Lazy, and most recently flat out worthless. FIFA 18 on the Switch was a disappointment, owing to running on an older engine, lacking many features and a lot of content, and essentially feeling like a last-gen FIFA. But with successive games, it's only gotten worse. FIFA 19 was barely an improvement, while FIFA 20 on the other hand is literally a copy-paste job of last year's game but with upgraded kits and squads, and yet it's being sold as a full-priced game. At this point, it's best if EA just doesn't release these games on the Switch at all. No one would miss them, and at least they could stop pretending like they're supporting the system. Dynasty Warriors. Koei Tecmo is basically synonymous with the Musou genre, what with its multiple Warriors games, series, and crossover titles, but their flagship Warriors series, Dynasty Warriors, just can't seem to get things right. Thrashing hundreds of people on a battlefield at the same time can be a lot of fun, but Dynasty Warriors just never does enough with that idea. When was the last time we got a truly good Dynasty Warriors game? Dynasty Warriors 4, which came out in 2003, was good but not great, and ever since then, it's been one average game after another. Most recently, Dynasty Warriors 9 tried to freshen things up by introducing an open world to the series' formula, but it too turned out to be a disappointing entry in the franchise. Need for Speed. For all we know, the upcoming Need for Speed Heat might turn out to be a return to form for the series. But let's face it, Need for Speed was once one of the best and most beloved racing franchises in the industry, whereas in recent years it's been anything but. When Ghost Games took over from Criterion as the custodians of the franchise, they actually started out on the right foot. Need for Speed Rivals was a solid game, but then came the disappointing No Limits. Then came the even more disappointing online-centric Need for Speed 2015. Then came Payback with its excessively greedy monetization and loot boxes, which ruined what could have been a perfectly good game. At this point, if Heat can't bring Need for Speed back on track, the franchise might just be beyond salvation. Mafia. This one hurts to talk about, because even now, after such a rocky road, Mafia is a franchise that a lot of people absolutely love. And then there's Mafia 3, which had a stellar story, excellent writing, and memorable performances from its actors, but was a huge disappointment in every gameplay aspect. So Mafia, unlike many other franchises in this feature, is a series we hope to see more of, if it can make good on its potential, that is. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.